I'm Susan Swain, host of C-SPAN's Q&A, where we spend an hour with nonfiction writers and historians who add context to today's news. On this episode of Q&A, you'll meet two millennial members of Congress's freshman class, Republican Representative-elect Kat Cammack of North Central Florida, who describes herself as a constitutional conservative. At 32, she's the youngest Republican woman elected to Congress in history. And Representative-elect Sara of San Diego. At 31, she's the youngest Democratic woman in the 117th Congress. She won her seat resoundingly in her second bid for the House. Kat Cammack, you have just been elected to represent Florida's 3rd District in the 117th Congress, and at 32 years of age will be the youngest Republican woman in the House of Representatives. When did you say, I want to do this?
You know, I had no plans originally to be involved in politics. It really wasn't my life plan, but I think growing up the daughter of a single mother and, growing up in a construction type household, I'm a 3rd generation commercial sandblaster, and I grew up on a small cattle ranch. We had a unique upbringing, and I kind of was exposed to how government and Main Street interacted, and really kind of grew up understanding that it didn't work really in the way that it would help small businesses or single parents and working class families. And it really came to a head in April of 2011 when we lost our small cattle ranch. And it was due to a big government one-size-fits-all program called the HAMP program. And that was the moment when we found ourselves homeless, that I had a choice to make. I could rebuild my life and get back on my life plan and take over the family business, or I could fight back. And I made a choice at that point in time that I was going to do everything that I possibly could so that no family ever had to go through what we went through in losing everything. And that was really the impetus for me getting involved. And since then, that's been my mission and my motivation.
Did your mom also become political by the experience?
No, my mom, I was actually raised in a Democrat household, but my mom, the way she raised me when it came to politics was you vote for the person, not for the party. And so it was a pretty, I would say average engagement in politics. We never went to any meetings or political rallies or gatherings or anything. And I think to this day, she still shakes her head a little bit when she sees her daughter so actively involved in politics. But the thing that she did teach me was politics will impact you whether you're involved or not. And so, just approach it with people in mind first rather than party.
What do you want to accomplish?
Oof. So I think women by their very nature, we have lists of things that we always want to tackle. We're great multitaskers, but things that I am very passionate about are very narrow, rural broadband being one of them. In my district, we have a tremendous need for connectivity. And I think that there's millions of Americans across this country, especially under COVID, who saw just how necessary reliable high-speed internet connection is, whether it be for commerce, whether it be for healthcare, whether it be for education. Now that there's so many children across this country being homeschooled and really doing the virtual schooling, it's critical more than ever. So I want to create the blueprint on how we can deliver on rural broadband across America. That is definitely my first and foremost priority for my district.
I want to show our viewers a clip from your victory speech on election night, just a brief one, just to give people a flavor of your campaign. Let's watch.
I'm so excited because not only will we be representing the Fighting Third, Florida's 3rd congressional district, as the youngest woman in the country, in the Republican Party, but we get the opportunity to represent conservative millennials, Gen Zs, women, and people of all backgrounds across this country and across this state. And I am going to work every single day. You thought we worked hard in this campaign, we're going to take it up a notch. We're going to work so hard every day to prove that we are a country worth saving, and we are a district that is not for sale.
You are a veteran of several political campaigns. What was it like campaigning during a pandemic year?
It interesting, to say the least. It definitely presented its own set of challenges, but I see a challenge really as an opportunity to innovate, get creative, and overcome. And a lot of my background has been about overcoming and having that grit to succeed despite all odds. So when COVID hit, our campaign really was just getting ramped up, and being a young campaigner, being the leader of a young campaign team, we had the ability to take our infrastructure and make it go digital pretty rapidly. So within 48 hours, we had everything on a digital platform, and we changed our entire grassroots strategy to grassroots in the digital realm. And so that was, like I said, a unique challenge for us, but it was exciting to get creative in how can you reach people in new ways in light of everything that was going on. And so I like to say that, even though I came out of a 10-way primary, and there was a lot of money that was being spent in this race, we really kept it in a personal one-on-one capacity in reaching people at their homes in ways that mattered and made sense to them. I think it presented a good opportunity for us to get creative and really elevate the next game of campaign tactics and strategy.
Well, how do you plan to use social media as a member of Congress?
I think I'm demonstrating that right now. I actually have been giving a behind-the-scenes look of freshman orientation. The last several weeks we've been in Washington. As you can see, I'm right now in the Library of Congress, and one of my favorite places in Washington. And we have made a point of really wanting to show our constituents and supporters all across the country what it is like to be a member of Congress. I hope that when people turn on their social media pages, whether it be Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, they're learning something and maybe inspiring them, hey, I could do that, or I would like to get involved, or I would like to learn more. It is our duty to really inspire that next generation to get involved. And now we have a seat at the table as a millennial that's so important. And so as we've been going through this orientation process, whether it be in an ethics training or a briefing about committees or something as simple as, hey, I'm walking through Statuary Hall or I'm in the Library of Congress, I'm taking my constituents on this journey with me because I think it adds that element of accountability and transparency so they know me as a person, but they also know what I'm doing up here on their behalf. And social media is going to be a top priority for me as we roll out all of our initiatives.
You came to Congress as a former congressional staffer, so you're very familiar with that building. Can you describe the difference of walking in there for the first time, wearing your congressional rep-elect pin and knowing that you, in fact, have been elected to serve?
It hasn't hit me yet. The feeling when you look up at the Capitol Dome or you see the Jefferson Building, you get the butterflies. And I got those butterflies as a staffer just because of the gravity and the historical nature of the buildings that we have the honor and privilege to walk in. Today, when I was walking into the Library of Congress, there were 4 Capitol Police officers, and we walked in and they said, "Oh, you're the new member from Florida. We've been seeing you on TV." And as I shook their hands, it was just the most amazing feeling of, getting to know the people that make up these institutions, that serve these institutions. And it is just the most amazing feeling, humbling, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. It hasn't set in completely yet. I find myself still pointing out bathrooms to members that are walking around lost, but we're having a good time, and I hope that I never lose that feeling of feeling small in these buildings.
You described yourself on all your campaign and your congressional materials as a constitutional conservative. Explain to me what that means to you.
So for me, I honestly have always believed that when you take your oath and you're sworn in as a member, or even as a congressional staffer, you take the oath to the United States Constitution. You don't take an oath to a political party. And our constituents, in my case, about 710,000 of them, expect me to legislate from a constitutional basis in a way that is meaningful and productive for our country as a whole, not a party. So for me, as I cast these votes and having been through this process a little bit, you see a lot of programs that aren't constitutional, that aren't clearly defined as a responsibility or duty of the federal government. There's so many things that I think the states have responsibility for that we have basically taken over. And so when I'm casting my votes, I'm really casting it with the Constitution in mind, approaching it as a holistic document rather than a la carte. There's so many times where people want to forget, one amendment over another. And I think that that's going to be really my basis and my foundation as I legislate come January 2021.
Where do you think that will place you within the Republican conference? Are you like-minded with most members, or do you think that might, in fact, be a challenge from time to time?
Well, I'm hoping that as everyone takes their oath to the United States Constitution, that they understand that we have a free constitutional republic. And I know that there are some members of the class going into the 117th Congress that are what they call progressive, and they would like to see a more socialist form of government coming in that is less about serving the individual and the people and more about serving government. I tend to side with the American people and the working class. I think that government operates best when it is small and accountable and transparent, and people have the power to control that. I don't think that people should work to serve the government and build these big bureaucratic programs. So as far as where I find myself, I am a pretty conservative member, but I'm American first. So I will work with members and those that seek to make our country a better place and really preserve the concept of equal opportunity rather than equal outcome.
Tell me a little bit about Florida 3 and what the challenges that your constituents face that they're hoping that you can help them with.
So I love Florida's 3rd Congressional District. I call us the Fightin' Third. We have incredible grit in our district, and it's unique in that we have a university, a major university, University of Florida, go Gators. And so we represent the Gator Nation and the real swamp in North Central Florida. And with that comes a lot of incredible research, development, investment in that innovation and technology. So we have that academia wing, but we also have incredible agricultural and rural areas that produce commodities and really feed our state and our country. It's really such a unique balance of things. We've got equine, the horse capital of the world is in our district, incredible bass fishing on the St. Johns River, the suburbs of Jacksonville. And the most important part is great people, just really, really warm, friendly, helpful people that want to do well for themselves and their family, and true patriots, honestly. The top issues, though, rural broadband, that hands down is our top priority. It's kind of crazy to me in 2020 that not every American has access to internet, and it's some that have a little bit of access, but they're underserved, or some that in fact have dial-up still. And you'll find that in my district. In the 60s, we put a man on the moon. So you would think in 2020, we could get every American hooked up to internet. So that is going to be huge for us, because as we look at bringing in that infrastructure, that is what is going to help us take our education to the next level: innovation, research, development, jobs. This is that critical infrastructure that really needs to be in place so that we can continue to grow and flourish and prosper. So rural broadband is huge. Fixing healthcare, rebuilding after COVID is tremendously important. I have a lot of small businesses that were affected tremendously, as the rest of the country was, with shutdowns. They've been extremely detrimental to our local economy, especially living in a university town. There's a lot of service-oriented companies and small businesses, and having that experience of growing up in a small business, I know that there's a lot of life savings and a lot of work and time, blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into these operations. And so I'm going to do what I can to make sure that we save them.
Your spouse, Matt Harrison, I understand, is a first responder in Gainesville. Well, what does he do? And my second question is, have the two of you figured out how you're going to approach the challenge of working in Washington and Gainesville at the same time?
So my husband, Matt, is a firefighter and a SWAT medic for the city of Gainesville. And his call sign or his nickname is Mr. Bean. So if anybody ever comes across him, it's kind of funny. He does respond to that. He's been serving our community for about 14 years as a firefighter and joined the SWAT team several years ago. So I like to say that he is the best thing that you can see. And he responds to people on their worst days. So he's seen our communities at some of their toughest times, whether it be someone's home in a fire, or someone in a terrible accident, or in the case of Florida, we have quite a few hurricanes. He's been responding to those for several years. And so for me, it's important that we have a servant's family. And together we have the Grit Foundation, which is a nonprofit that raises money for critical life-saving equipment for our first responders. And his work with the first responder community as a first responder, I've been able to see firsthand where we have gaps and what we need to be doing to better support our first responders, both law enforcement and the fire department. We've seen a tremendous shift in communities, not just in our own hometown, but across the country, where first responders are really under attack. They're not receiving the necessary resources in order to do their jobs, which by extension keep our communities safe. And of course, there is the defund police movement, which is, I think, incredibly detrimental to our communities and the safety and well-being of our communities as a whole. So I'm going to be very active in supporting that up here on Capitol Hill, and making sure that our first responders and their families know that we've got their back. But as far as making the dynamic work, we actually received the House session calendar yesterday for what days I'll be in Washington voting. And I have to say I'm quite disappointed. We are actually, I think, setting a record for the least days of votes in the year 2021. And I think that the American people will be very disappointed when they see the lack of work that's being done up here by their representatives. So it keeps me back home. The session calendar that they propose will have me back home quite a bit, which of course I enjoy and want to be home. But I also have a job to do, and I want to make sure that we're doing that. So when he is off, the way that the first responder schedule works, he works 24 hours and then he's off for 48. Whenever we can get a break like that, he'll join me up here in Washington as often as he can. And of course, I'll be home every weekend. And for every time that there's not a vote up here, I'll be back home. So we don't have kids yet, just some chickens, ducks, and a dog. So we'll figure out the family dynamic as we get further along.
Yeah, all of which also need care along the way, don't they? So you've got a month to go until you're actually sworn in. So let me return to freshman orientation. We have a clip of, you talked about how your cell phone was recording much of the process for folks back home, your constituents. Let's show people a little bit of what you captured in freshman orientation.
Hey guys, it's Cammack, your constitutional conservative representing Florida's 3rd District, and I'm here with my friends. We got Beth from Texas, Byron, my buddy from Florida. We got Pat, we got Santos, we got the whole crew in the house. We got the Bach from Minnesota. Hey Andrew. Hey Georgia. Yeah, it's too late. It's too late. And we have just finished up our first presentation. It was about COVID in the workplace. And as you can see, we are already rebelling.
What were you rebelling against?
Well, it's no secret that there's a bit of a debate nationally about the effectiveness of masks. And so there was half of our freshman orientation that was pro-mask, and half that was anti or for masks, and some were against the mask. And so we had just received a briefing talking about the effectiveness of masks, and the data was pretty dismal. And so in a moment of rebellion, we took our masks off in the break. And, it's just a little bit of lighthearted fun as we've been going through this. Freshman orientation is not exempt from some of the adjustments that, we've had to make because of COVID, just as every other industry has across the country. So there's some folks that feel much more comfortable wearing the masks, and there's some that weren't. And that was our moment of rebellion.
So going through orientation and having been on Capitol Hill as a staff member, is there anything that you have learned as a member-elect that surprised you, or pretty much know the whole routine?
I subscribe to the theory that you don't know what you don't know. So even though I have had experience up here as a congressional staffer, there's always things that you can learn. And really talking to folks that have been here for a long time, both staff and members, you realize that you could be here for decades and you still wouldn't know everything. There's a lot that there's yet to learn, and I haven't really been surprised by much other than unfortunately the disorganization of the majority's leadership, and that has been really disappointing. Like I said, the session calendar, I was very surprised that, especially given the state that our country is in, how little time is going to be dedicated to actually governing and legislating and doing the things that we have been tasked with by our constituents. That's been very disappointing. But the thing that has been surprising to me is in our class, the 117th, both Republicans and Democrats, we have been getting along fabulously. And I think that spirit of bipartisanship and common ground now that we're finding and seeing is something that we can translate into work. And so that has been a little bit surprising. You see how much division is out there, and that's played out in the mainstream media. But when we were in our orientation, even though, we have some differences on policy and tactics and whatnot, we still are able to get along with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I think that was surprisingly refreshing.
Well, it sounds optimistic, but I watched one interview that you did, and you said to the interviewer, C-SPAN's going to look a little bit more like pay-per-view in the new Congress. What did you mean by that?
We're going to have some spirited debates. And you know what? I have been a C-SPAN fan for my entire life. And of course, watching the House floor, you can see some pretty lengthy debates that go back and forth. And sometimes there's not a whole lot of activity. But I know my colleagues in the 117th, we are anxious and ready to get to work. So you're going to see some very spirited debates about the future of our country on the House floor. So C-SPAN will, I like to say, get a little bit saucier, a little bit more spicy.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that. We didn't see it in that group of members, mostly men in that just by chance, but there are 18 women in the GOP freshman class. I'm wondering if you see the possibility of a subgroup of that forming the same kind of coalition as the squad, as they're known, the progressives in last time's freshman class, and really making a name for yourself in policy and using social media. Do you see that developing in any way?
I do. I think that that's something that has to happen organically. It's nothing that can really be planned. I think when it comes across as, very orchestrated and planned, it comes across as disingenuous. So I think that as we move through the process of getting through orientation and really getting to know each other, there's already a few members that, we've gotten along really well, and I think we'll be working on projects together. But that will happen just naturally. I think that, the way that the squad came together, there were, 4 women that really found common ground in the issues that they were wanting to work on. They had a great friendship, and it really bloomed from that. I don't think they called themselves that. I think that name was given to them. And I think you'll see the same thing happening on our side, with conservatives. It's not something that will come, in a packaged deal with a bow on it. I think it'll happen probably in the first few months of the 117th.
When will you find out your committee assignments?
So the process of getting your committee assignments, we've been already meeting with different members and the steering committee and folks that are on those committees right now, and making our case to getting on those. The issue is that Speaker Pelosi has not set the ratios. In fact, like I said, we just got the calendar yesterday and found out that we will be swearing in on the 3rd, which is a Sunday, which is unusual. So a little bit of disorganization there, but we're trying our best to be flexible. we are told that we probably won't have our committee assignments until the second or third week of January, which is, again, unusual. Typically, you would know your committee assignments earlier than that, but we're waiting on Speaker Pelosi to negotiate ratios with Leader McCarthy.
If you could have your pick, what would they be?
Ag and Homeland.
And why is that?
So, both of those committees are incredibly important to my district and to the state. Also, I have tremendous experience with both of those. I come from a district that is heavily agricultural, and in the state of Florida, the number 2 driver of the economy is ag. We have seen a tremendous need for strong advocates for our farmers and ranchers and rural America. And I believe I would be a strong voice, and I would be the only Republican in the state of Florida to be on agriculture now that Representative Yoho is leaving Congress. And of course, Representative Dunn is making a jump to another committee. So that would be a hole that I would intend to fill. And with regard to Homeland, I think it is more critical than ever that we focus on protecting the homeland and, really securing our borders, really putting Americans' national security at the forefront and putting America first. I received my master's degree from the United States Naval War College, and I think that in my time in that program, I learned how critical it is. And really, it's one of the few things that we are charged with in the Constitution as federal legislators. And so I think there's tremendous work that we have to do there. Of course, being a Florida member, we are very used to seeing storms roll through, and that committee actually has jurisdiction over FEMA. And so I think there's some reforms that we could make that would better protect our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure, as we move through this next Congress. And so those 2 committees are really important to me, and that's what I'll be working towards over the next few weeks.
Because it's an important moment in your personal political history, have you yet given thought to what your very first speech on the floor of the House will be about?
I have a list of topics and ideas, but we haven't decided on it yet.
And give me a couple of the list of topics. What are the top 1 or 2?
It could range anywhere from maybe something very specific about homeland security and critical infrastructure like rural broadband. It could be a little bit more philosophical in talking about the importance of protecting our free constitutional republic and really legislating from the constitutional perspective. It could be something dealing with human trafficking. That's an issue that I'm very passionate about. We haven't decided yet. I think that it'll become clear as we get closer to the date of when we swear in, but haven't had the opportunity to take that oath yet. So we're gonna be strategic and really wait and see what the feeling is as we get there.
So we have about 2 minutes left. Moving to national politics as we close, President Trump has indicated that he may announce a bid for re-election as soon as inauguration week in January. Do you think ultimately that's a good thing for your party, for the country, or would you like to see a chance for a new generation of Republican leaders?
I've been a vocal advocate and supporter of the president and remain that way to this day. I think that the president is exercising his right to explore all options. And, we know his personality. He is a worker and a fighter. And I think at the end of the day, only he can make that decision. There's no amount of supporters or advisors who can change his mind or sway his opinion. And I think that's what people appreciate most about him. So that remains to be seen of if he's going to do that, and we'll comment then. But, I think that President Trump has been incredible for this country. He did exactly what he campaigned on, and it was a breath of fresh air. Seeing someone who was willing to put all things aside, all the politics aside, and really work to try to get things done in a meaningful way for our country. So I have been very, very happy with President Trump. As I said, he is still going through that process, and I stand by him in that process. And as far as the future of the Republican Party, I would like us to really focus on the Constitution and providing opportunities for people to make choices for themselves and their families. That's what's important. And like I say, the future of the Republican Party should be, simply put, equal opportunity, not equal outcome. And that is what the future is going to look like for the Conservative Party moving forward.
Representative-elect Cammack, a Republican of Florida, the 3rd District around Gainesville, the youngest woman in the 117th class in the Republican Conference. Thank you for spending time introducing yourself to the C-SPAN audience. I'm sure they'll be seeing lots of you after January 3rd. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Our race here in the 53rd District was about so much more than one person. It was about putting an end to the politics of toxicity and division. It was about showing that we don't have to settle for the way things have always been done. It was about sending a new generation of leaders to Congress who will do things differently and will listen to everyone and respect everyone and work across the aisle to actually get things done for families here in San Diego.
Representative-elect Sara Jacob, that's a clip from you on election night when you learned that you would become the youngest Democratic woman in the 117th Congress, representing California's 53rd. Has that fact sunk in for you yet?
I'll be honest, it is a bit surreal. In part because of COVID, we haven't gotten to do all of the pomp and circumstance that I think will make it really feel real. But I will say the first time I walked on the House floor as a member-elect, as we were looking around and thinking about all of the people who have served in that room, all of the important decisions that have been made in that room, and really thinking about the fact that our country is in a hopefully once in a generation public health and economic crisis, and that our class and I have really been elected to be the ones to help us get out of it. I feel the weight of that responsibility really heavily.
You'd made a bid for Congress 2 years earlier, obviously unsuccessful. This time around, you won resoundingly against a Democratic opponent. What was the key to your victory this time, do you think?
You know, we, from the very beginning of the primary, were very intentional about building a campaign that everyone could be a part of. And that was about building a broad coalition of people who knew that they wouldn't agree with me on every issue, but that I would always listen and I would always respect them. And that I fundamentally believe that you would rather have a representative that you trust than one that you agree with on every issue. And so we were able to put together that coalition from across the political spectrum because of California's top 2 system. I was running against another Democrat. And so to win, I had to both win Democratic voters and win no party preference and Republican voters. And, we were able to do that with this message of listening and respecting. And that's exactly the approach I'll bring to governing.
We've done some interviews with reform advocates who believe that California's system should be adopted more broadly, perhaps even nationally. What are the advantages and disadvantages of it?
This is my second time running in the top 2 primary system. I think that its intention was to make the process more democratic, small d, so that more people were able to have a say in who was representing them, and not only the people who turn out in party primaries, which tends to be a smaller selection of the electorate. I will say I do think it was important that I had to win voters who were not Democrats in order to get elected. I think that gives me a unique approach. But I also think that sometimes because there's so much fear about 2 of the same party making it through, you end up actually having more of a say and more of a heavy hand by party structures than you otherwise would, which is exactly opposite the intention.
One of our goals in talking with you is to let C-SPAN viewers who follow a lot of Congress know a little bit more about the members who will be coming in. So I want to spend a little bit of time on your life story. Every biography of you, of course, points out that you were the granddaughter of the founder of Qualcomm, Irwin Jacobs. So let's start there. What influence did your grandfather have on your life, on your worldview?
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of everything that my grandfather has been able to do. And he always taught us that it was our unique responsibility to use the advantages and the responsibilities that we've been given in order to make sure that every family had access to the kinds of opportunities that our family had access to. My family was at one point Jewish immigrants. My grandfather is the first in his family to go to college. He got his PhD and then worked at a public university. And in part because of that public investment in universities and the fact that he didn't graduate with student loan debt, he was able to start a business that has really revolutionized the way we communicate. And, frankly, has really built San Diego into the high-tech hub that it is. And, I believe that it's my responsibility now to make sure that future generations, that my generation, millennials, who are saddled with trillions of dollars of student loan debt and two once in a lifetime, once in a generation economic crises that we've already had to weather, are able to, really live the same kind of American dream that my family had access to.
So who or what along the way inspired you to turn towards Washington? Your route to Congress was through the policy arena. What started all that for you?
I had always been taught that I had to figure out where I could have the most impact and make the biggest difference for the most amount of people and the most vulnerable people. And for a long time, I thought that was as a policy advisor, whether it was working at UNICEF on how we could better serve vulnerable children around the world, working at the UN in peacekeeping and at the State Department in conflict prevention and stabilization, really trying to work on some of these really complex and seemingly intractable problems. But after 2016, when I was working on the Clinton campaign as one of her foreign policy advisors, after we lost, I realized that as much as I still prefer writing policy memos to giving press interviews, no offense, that at the end of the day, everything I cared about was at risk here at home. And that many of the challenges that I was working on overseas were also happening here. And that I had to stop writing talking points for someone else to say, and I had to step out and start saying it myself.
How would you describe your political philosophy?
I consider myself a pragmatic progressive. I think we have to be talking about the huge challenges and problems that are facing our country that have been laid bare and exacerbated by COVID-19, but under most circumstances, were not created by COVID-19. In San Diego County alone, prior to COVID-19, we had about 40% of our kids who were living in families experiencing poverty. And to me, in one of the wealthiest counties, in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country that the world has ever known, that is simply unacceptable. And I know that the only way to do big things and the only way to really move things forward is to build coalitions of people and to make sure you're bringing everyone along. And that's really how I approach governance and how I approach what we're going through right now, that we have to be thinking about really big change that we need to make moving forward and the kinds of challenges we're going to be facing in the future. We can't settle for the way things have always been done, and we can't just try and recreate something that used to exist that doesn't anymore. But we have to do it by working across the aisle, by working with a wide variety of folks and really building that kind of coalition that makes these changes lasting.
Well, two follow-ups on that. First of all, your own Democratic caucus has members from far left to the moderate and everywhere in between. Many observers say it's going to be a challenge for the speaker to form that into a successful governing coalition. Where do you see yourself building bridges with the other members of your caucus?
Look, in my couple of weeks here as a member-elect, I have to say that I have been so enjoyed getting to know other members of my freshman Democratic class, other members of the Democratic caucus. And while I know people love to talk about what differences there are in the caucus, I will say that we all agree on so much more than what we disagree on. And we all know that we're going to have to get relief to families and small businesses and assistance to those who need it most to make it through this difficult time that we're in right now. And I'm really looking forward to working with my colleagues to push that forward.
Well, then moving to the other side of the aisle, conservatives raising a lot of concern about the size of the debt, how to spend money efficiently during the COVID crisis. Where do you see that as an area of conflict or an area of possibility for finding consensus?
I think that even some of the Republican colleagues I've met from the freshman class understand that this is a unique time and that we're going to have to do a lot to make sure that our small businesses, that our economy really makes it through this time and is able to grow on the other side. And I honestly think that we need to stop talking about this in terms of just broad numbers and really think about this as investments. As you mentioned, my grandfather is a business person. I think any business person will tell you that you have to take on some debt sometimes in order to make the kind of capital expenditure investments you need to grow in the future. And so what I'm really focused on is what we're spending money on. Can we put investments in early childhood education, in childcare, which we know pay huge dividends down the road? Make sure that we're putting in place the kinds of infrastructure and protections and investments we need to do right now so that our economy can grow and grow in an equitable way on the other side.
In your victory speech, you made reference to your generation, the millennials. And I looked it up yesterday. The average age of the members of the House is going to be about 58 years old. Again, we told folks you were 31 at the outset. And in fact, there will be 31 millennial members of the 117th Congress. What opportunities does the millennial class of Congress present for the institution? Do you see the institution changing more because of your presence, or are you all changing because of all of the traditions of the Congress?
I think it's going to have to be a little bit of both. I'm already learning that things here in Congress don't work quite as quickly as just, clicking a button on an app and things happening. But I really think that our generation can bring a unique approach. Many of us graduated into the Great Recession. We're now facing the second huge economic crisis in our adult lives. As everything is moving digitally because of COVID-19, I think we have an important voice to add on some of these questions around data privacy, around new technologies, and what kinds of rules we can be putting in place. And of course, I'm of the generation that has never known a day in our adult lives that the United States hasn't been at war. I was in middle school when September 11th happened. And so I think the idea of ending the forever wars takes a special import for us because we know the costs that has had on us here domestically and on our generation. And, one of the things I really want to focus on is rebuilding America's standing around the world and making sure that we are ending the forever wars responsibly and that we're really thinking about how we can craft a foreign policy that will address the challenges in the future and that we're rebuilding for those future challenges, things like global pandemics, like climate change, so that we're really able to build a future for us, but also for our children. We talk a lot about climate change in our generation because I'd like to have kids one day, and I'd like there to be a world that they can live in.
Well, speaking of climate change, this morning, as we're taping this, woke up to the news that there's another Southern California wildfire, one of many very catastrophic fires this year. What do you think Congress can do about that situation?
So the wildfires have been incredibly difficult to deal with this year. When I was growing up in San Diego, fire season was October, maybe September, and now it feels like they are virtually year round. So the most important thing we need to do from Congress is actually address climate change because that is the central cause of why we're having so much of an increase in the wildfire threat in California. Also, most of the forest land in California is actually managed by the federal government. So making sure we're making those investments that we need to proactively address fire threat. And then really also making sure that we are protecting and fully funding our firefighters, that they have the resources that they need, that we are addressing the fact that firefighters have a rate of suicide much higher than the general population, that firefighters often have a lot of health threats because of the risk they put themselves in addressing these fires. And right now, especially as we know that state and local governments are really feeling these budget crunches, that the federal government is providing that support so that we can make sure our first responders are still getting paid and still getting paid what they deserve doing these incredibly important jobs.
While we're talking about California issue, your district particularly has a really big naval presence. I'm wondering if how you specifically would like to serve that constituency, and more specifically, if you could be responsible for a change for military families or veterans, what would it be?
It's an incredibly important issue for my district. I'm hoping to serve on the House Armed Services Committee so that I can make sure that our district and our region is represented in that area. My predecessor, Congresswoman Susan Davis, had really been a leader on that committee. And there's a lot we need to do. But one of the most important things that I think we'll need to do is really invest in our military families. In San Diego County alone, prior to COVID-19, we had about 39,000 members of military families who visited the food bank every single month. And when I talk to military families, one of the things I hear most often is the need for childcare. I think that making sure we're addressing our military families' childcare needs is important for them, but it's also important for our readiness as a force. And I'm hoping I can work on that issue on the Armed Services Committee, and also that as we're putting in place those protections and investments in childcare for our military families, we're actually learning how we can extend affordable universal childcare to all families in our country, because we know how important that is for an equitable recovery.
Also, very important to San Diego and California are immigration issues. That is on a short list for incoming President Biden. What would you like to see change with regard to immigration policy?
Yes, we in San Diego really feel the brokenness of our immigration system very deeply. And we also know very personally the amazing contributions that immigrants make to our community. We have about $5 million that we lost in the few hours that President Trump closed San Ysidro Port when he was trying to make a point about immigration. That's a huge impact on our regional economy. And so I think we need a comprehensive approach to addressing this. I think, first of all, we need to make sure we are putting in place a Clean Dream Act so that young people who are here are able to stay here and able to build their lives and know that there's not this sense of uncertainty on the other side. And then that we need to make sure we're keeping families together and that our economy has the kinds of workers that we need without allowing businesses to use those visa laws to underpay workers. I think obviously my district is very close to the border. We do need border security, but I know that there's a humane way to enforce our immigration laws.
President Trump campaigned on and spoke often and did a lot of work on a border wall. Do you think border wall is a successful policy for the United States?
I think it's clear that the border wall that President Trump was trying to create has not been an effective strategy. I will say in California, we do have some similar assets that were put in place by President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. But I think that as you look at what we need to do on immigration, it's clear that physical infrastructure is not necessarily what we're missing. What we need is a focus on narco and human trafficking. We need to make sure that we are welcoming refugees and asylum seekers who want to come to the United States to really protect themselves and to help us build our country. We in San Diego have been really affected by the Remain in Mexico policy and by the asylum metering that has happened because we are a close region with Tijuana, and we see the detrimental impact that has. And so fixing a lot of the most horrific parts of the Trump administration's legacy on immigration, I think, will be really important.
We're talking to you in Washington, but San Diego is 3,000-mile commute away. Have you decided or figured out how you're going to manage your long-distance district?
It's definitely interesting to be a member from California. A lot of the advice they've been giving us in new member orientation doesn't necessarily apply for us with districts that are so far away. But I plan on being back and forth very often. This is one of the areas where I think my youth might be an advantage, a little bit less of wear and tear on the body. But also my background is in foreign policy. And so I used to have to be on airplanes quite frequently, going really long distances to do my work. And so I think it's something I'll be able to adjust to pretty quickly.
During orientation, you were unanimously elected by your classmates as the freshman representative to the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. What does that mean? What will you be doing there?
So the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee is the committee within the Democratic caucus that works on committee assignments and the broad policy priorities for the caucus. Right, we just finished doing committee chair races, which the steering committee plays an important role in. And next we'll be working on committee assignments. And my primary goal will be making sure that my fellow freshman Democrats, who are incredibly inspiring and thoughtful people, are in positions where they can have a real impact for our country and for their districts.
You mentioned that armed services was a priority for you because of the naval military presence in your district. What else would you like as a committee assignment?
I'd really like to serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That's my background. And also, I think one of the really big challenges that we're going to be faced with a new president as we work to rebuild America's standing around the world.
When will you know you've got an inside view because you're on the committee, but when will you know that you've achieved the committees you wanted or not?
I'm hoping we'll be able to get our committee assignments by swearing in, but in years past, it sometimes extends into the first month of the new Congress.
The 117th Congress will have at least 121 women. There's a couple races still to be resolved. Does gender matter when it comes to Congress? Will the presence of so many women have any effect on the legislative output?
Absolutely. I think that we, because of our experiences, bring a different perspective around the table. For instance, I know how important childcare will be to an equitable recovery because I've talked to so many of my friends and so many of my constituents many women, but not necessarily only women, who will not be able to return to the workforce until we figure out how we can address this childcare crisis that our country faces. I think when you look at healthcare, reproductive healthcare is my primary healthcare. And so making sure that that is part of any conversation of healthcare. And, as a young woman, I didn't need the Me Too movement to know that sexual harassment in the workplace was a problem because I've experienced it. And I think the more perspectives that we have, the more things like that will be brought to the table, that everyone brings their own lived experience. And while we do need the lived experience of everyone right now, just a certain perspective is overrepresented. And so making sure that we do have more people around the table who can really make sure we're addressing all of the challenges that our country and our constituents are facing will be really important.
How important is it to the California delegation that the Speaker of the House is from your state? And second question is, did you know Nancy Pelosi before you were elected this time around?
Well, we're very proud that we get to claim Speaker Nancy Pelosi as one of our delegation. I think she is exactly the person we need leading our caucus through this difficult time. And I'm really proud that one of my first votes in Congress will be to vote for her as Speaker. I had known the Speaker previously. She is an amazing mentor to many young women, and I have been really grateful for all of her advice and guidance over the years.
Give our viewers, again, who watch Congress so much more than the average person, a sense of what the last couple of weeks has been like for you. How busy are your days? What kinds of things are you learning as a representative-elect?
Well, they've been very busy. I will say I'm told that our orientation is very different from years past because of COVID-19. We haven't done a lot of the more ceremonial pieces that, as I mentioned, I think are really going to make all of this sink in. New member orientation is a very weird mix of the very big going on the House floor for the first time, really understanding the kinds of decisions that we're going to be asked to make very quickly in the new term, and the very mundane tasks of just starting a new job and filling out a lot of paperwork and understanding how you set up the phone system in your new office and things like that. So we've been doing all of that, have gotten our briefings on house ethics, on all the different policies that we now have to, uphold, how we set up our office, really thinking through the most strategic way to do hiring. And then also, as I mentioned, getting to go on the House floor for the first time as a member-elect, learning how to vote, getting our official portrait taken, doing our franking signature. So it's really been a whirlwind of a couple of weeks. But I will say my favorite part has been getting to know all of my fellow freshmen and all of the other members. And I'm really excited to be joining them as a colleague very soon here.
Have you found one or two that you might even share a name with that you see that I can work with that person, perhaps on the other side of the aisle?
Well, there aren't that many Saras in Congress, but I have gotten to know many folks in both my Democratic freshman class and the Republican freshman class, and I think that we're going to have a lot that we're able to work on together.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We're speaking about 1 month before the opening day of Congress. What does that 1 month look like for you? How will you be spending the next couple of weeks? And literally, how many hours a day are you spending at work right now?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm always working. I sleep sometimes. But honestly, as a millennial, I think that's how many of us engage with the workforce. My next couple of weeks are going to be really focused on hiring my team, getting my district office set up, making sure that as soon as January 3rd comes, we will be able to really hit the ground running and make sure that there's no break in representation or constituent services for our district. I'm very lucky that my predecessor is an amazing mentor of mine and has been incredible through this transition, and her team are really making sure we have what we need to be successful. And I'm very excited to be getting back to my district, not only because it's December in Washington, D.C., and I'm very cold as a San Diegan, but because, I really want to make sure that we are meeting with all of the community groups in there and that everyone there knows what I'll be prioritizing in the first part of the new Congress, and that we're getting feedback and really starting to build that relationship we'll need to be successful moving forward.
So if we have the opportunity, it's the final question for you because we're almost out of time, but if we have the opportunity to talk with you 1 year from right now, and you're finishing up your first year in the House of Representatives, what will you most have liked to have accomplished?
Universal affordable childcare. I think that it's important for our families to make it through this time. It's important for our children to get quality early childhood education that we know pays huge dividends in their ability to be successful in the future. And most childcare providers are small businesses that are run by women and predominantly women of color. And so making sure we're investing in our small business, our childcare infrastructure, and that we're making sure that those childcare jobs are good paying jobs will be an important component of any equitable recovery.
Representative-elect Sara Jacobs of California, 31, who will be part of the millennial class in the new Congress and the youngest woman in the House of Representatives in the incoming class. Thank you for spending time with C-SPAN.
Of course, great to be here.
Thanks for listening to C-SPAN's Q&A. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and you'll never miss an episode. And while you're there, please take a minute to rate and review us. You can also send us an email at podcasts@c-span.org with your questions, comments, or ideas. Your feedback is welcome.